Good day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Why You Do What You Do by the Building Industry Association's Bay Area Young Professionals. I'm your host, Mark Sherlock. Today's guest is an architect, senior designer, and principal at DAHLIN Architecture and Planning. Please welcome Kurt Donnelly. Kurt, great to have you on the show today. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Pleasure's all mine, Kurt. So I gave you a brief description of the format. We got 3 questions for you. Answer them however you like, and we'll get going.
Sounds good.
So, Kurt, first question, how did you get to senior designer and principal at DAHLIN Architecture and Planning?
Whoa, that's I was going to go back even farther than that, but
Please do.
I started back in 1983, believe it or not. Chip Pearson, who many of you listeners know, was a principal here, and I think he was employee number 1, actually. And he called me up and hired me on my birthday back in 1983. It was the best birthday present I've ever had, I think. I happened to be working at a small firm in Walnut Creek, and when I told him I was going to go to DAHLIN, he said, "Well, just give you one little bit of advice, just only stay there about 2 or 3 years." So and I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, you just want to get as much experience as you can." Well, I extended that a few more years. It's now 39 years and counting. And honestly, I think his purpose was right. I mean, the fact is, I got a lot of experience starting from project management all the way through. They found out really quickly I was a terrible project manager, by the way. And when I interviewed with Chip, he asked me, "What's your short-term, long-term goals?" And I said, "Well, I want to be licensed architect. Want to learn the ropes here, but I also my long-term goal and short-term goals is to be a designer." And he goes, "Really?" And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "Well, only about 10% of the people that sit across the table from him when doing interviews actually say that they want to be a full-time designer." And I just thought, when I got into architecture school and everything, I thought everybody wanted to be a designer. So I was kind of surprised at that. But within about a year or two, I was made a full-time designer, and been doing it ever since. Again, they found out real quickly my project management skills really are not very good. I still hand draw everything, old school, as you've seen me hand draw things in front of you before. I call myself a designosaur, but I have a lot of really talented, skilled people around me that have all the other skill sets, from SketchUp modeling to CAD and Revit. So I lean on them quite a bit.
Awesome, Kurt. And yes, as somebody who has seen you draw, I appreciate you sticking around for DAHLIN as long as you did, because if you didn't, I would have never met you. I would have never seen your drawing, and I never would have been able to pick up so many design cues. Can you go back and just talk about University of Oregon? Talk about your college. Talk about how you got, like, why architecture? You're such a pure designer that I don't think exists truly as, like, in this day and age as it used to. How did all of that come about?
We'll go back a little bit further than that. And
Okay.
in high school, I took a mechanical drafting class. And I was good enough that the teacher made me the TA the next year. And in that year, I was given the opportunity to design a house that our construction class built the following year. So what happens is that the drafting class would draw the house, and the next year the construction class would build it. So and actually I helped build the one before that. And actually, even during the summers. So I got a little construction experience, but I also learned how to design. So literally at 17 years old, I'd already designed my first house. And as far as I know, it's still standing. So it's saying something. But I started there, and then I applied to only one school, University of Oregon. I probably would have gone to community college or something like that if I hadn't have made it in. But they accepted me. And I ended up really learning about design a little bit later. I really didn't understand the whole concept of that, but I knew I wanted to design. That was really it. My father was a amateur cartoonist, and actually sometime professional. He would do events around town. He would draw the Disney characters on big boards, and then they put the fireworks in for 4th of July, things like that. He would draw for different events for Elks Lodge and Muth Lodge, things like that, and also illustrated a few children's books. So I understood drawing. I never got his talent. In fact, both my brothers have better talent in drawing than I do. But I'm the only one that went into the profession, that is. But, you know, he was an inspiration to me as an artist. And so I took a little bit of that. Both my parents, my mom she was influenced by growing up in San Francisco, and she was always noticing that I liked buildings more than I liked nature, even though we always went to the camping for our vacations. But I was really enthralled by the city and the urban life, and there was something about that was really interesting. So I moved down here fairly quickly out of college, and started my career. I had a couple of influencers though in University of Oregon, and that's probably your next question, I think.
Absolutely. So again, what was the most inspirational moment that has shaped your career path or people?
Well, it started in high school, obviously, having a chance to design, but in University of Oregon, I took a class in I think it was my 3rd year. It was called Spatial Composition. Earl Morrison, I'll never forget. And he's long gone now, but I don't think he understands how many people he really influenced when it comes to design. Spatial composition, really just the understanding of how things are put together, contiguous spaces are put together and everything. Just the principles of design. And that's sort of, I think, the aha moment for me. That's when the light went on and said, oh, okay, this is what this is about. And my next 2 classes, including my thesis class, I was a pretty strong designer in those, I think, because of that class and really understanding it. Grant McKerney was a theater arts teacher. And the one thing I really believe in is, that there's so many different experience that you have, like raw material for your brain to design and brain to create with. And I think theater and dance and music and all those things are influencers to me. Grant McKerney, I think, taught me that theater arts, and he was just an amazing professor. I think he won the best professor 2 years in a row or something like that. He's long gone as well, but he was the one who actually gave my review at my thesis project. And it was pretty fun. It was a theater, by the way, so it made a lot of sense that he gave that. But anyway, he was a great influence on me, not necessarily for the project itself, but for the idea behind the arts in and of itself. And then of course, at University of Oregon, at DAHLIN Group, I've got several people. Obviously, I hitched my wagon to a star here, Doug Dahlin and Chip Pearson and John Thatch and Carl Danielson and all those guys that really were great influences to me. John Thatch in particular, though, allowed me to design. He basically would hand me a napkin sketch in the morning, run off to whatever he was doing, because he was him well enough. He's still working. That's the amazing thing. I'm still working with John and Doug every day. It's an amazing thing, almost 40 years now. But he gave me the opportunity. He kind of trusted me. He knew I was going to make mistakes, but he let me make mistakes and let me learn on the fly. And that was probably the best thing for me, because I just sat down and tried to do it and learn from my mistakes. And he would show up at the end of the day, and he would rip it apart usually, but I mean, in a good way. He would move things around, and his drawings, and John, if he ever listens to this, he'll know this. His sketches were like reading a doctor's prescription. I mean, it was like a couple things, and then he would point out what it is. And when I say napkin sketch, it wasn't far off from that. A lot of times he was on a plane, and he would sketch something up and hand it to me the next morning. But he would have to point out what it was that he was talking. I couldn't understand it, but he would tell me, and then I went, okay. And then at the end of the day, I would hopefully have figured that out. So John has been a great influence. I mean, he still is.
He's been drawing your sketches from, early on in his career. I appreciate how very clear they were. As some people might know, we call it Kurt CAD. And It was pretty amazing, Kurt. To this day, still some of the floor plans, some of the elevations. I mean, I appreciate it because when I came in to my first architectural job, I knew the technical skills. I knew how to draft. I knew how to 3D model, but I didn't know that much about designing. And just analyzing a floor plan or an elevation that you produced in a napkin sketch. Again, napkin sketch is not doing it justice by any means. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that because you taught me a lot that I don't think you would ever realized.
You're giving more credit than I deserve. I'm sure the Kurt CAD comment is true though, and people know that when I draw, I'm thinking I'm going to get it fairly close in the square footage and all that. But then when it's put into CAD, it's another story usually. So using Kurt and CAD together is kind of an irony.
Absolutely. So Kurt, third and final question for you. The theme behind the whole show. Why do you do what you do?
Oh man. I mean, one of the things that I still go back to University of Oregon and give reviews, mostly for Terminal Studios, which is the 5th year classes. I've been doing that for about 10 years now. And it's really inspiring to go back and see people that are interested in housing. And since most of this is the listeners are home builders, I would say I always point out that when I go back to the classes, I'm actually reviewing housing designs. There's a class at University of Oregon called Housing Boot Camp where they design something every week or every 9 days, I think, something like 9 out of 9 weeks. So it's something like 7, 8 different projects. It's pretty intense. The thesis projects are, obviously a 1 or 2 term projects. But anyway, going back there, I always point out how, in my opinion, when you get into architecture, you think, well, you're going to design high rises and office buildings and clubhouses and seemingly fun things. But I think it's much more heroic in a way to design something that's a home, that's a shelter. I really think that, it's the largest purchase anyone will ever make, usually, is their house. And it's the one place that they're going to raise their family. They're and you're designing something for not just one person, for a whole family and maybe even their friends. And it's going to be around a long time. I think there was a quote one time I had read that one thing about architecture is you can walk in your dreams, and you can actually, you can design something in your head and it actually comes to fruition, and it's going to be around for 40, 50 years and maybe even longer. And so I think it's really important to take to heart, design for homes themselves. So I love designing homes. I design many other things. The last couple of weeks I've been designing a community center for a large community up in Boise. I present that tomorrow. And so it's all about community and design, and I've loved it for my whole life. My wife, I keep on saying I need to retire, and my wife goes, "You love it too much," and she's right. I don't love it as much as 60 hours a week, but I do love what I do. I've been very, very fortunate to have a lot of very talented people around me for all these years, and some of them continue for almost 40 years now. So it's been pretty special. I got very, very fortunate from high school through college, and then in my workplace to have a chance to learn from some great people.
Awesome. Well, Kurt, thank you so much for taking your time today to just have this discussion with me. You've been a big influence on me throughout my career. I just hope somebody else gets to watch this and just draw a little bit of inspiration, maybe even reach out just so they can show it, just so they can see a Kurt design or a Kurt CAD, because it's a beautiful thing.
Hey, I always one thing I do is put my drawing board out in front there. I'm not
That's
sequestered
true.
in a room. I like people to walk by and see. I really believe in the collaborative process. I mentioned a lot of people around here helping me out, but also, a lot of the collaboration between builders like yourself. We've done many design charrettes together, right, and throughout Tommy James Homes divisions. And that collaborative process is quite fun, and that gets me up every day to try to try to match that kind of energy with a lot of the different people in those rooms, and you guys bring a great design sense and Tommy especially, a design sense about you. So I've been very, very happy to work with some great builders. Many of them hopefully are on this podcast, but I'd have to thank them too, because that's really who we work for.
Absolutely. Well, Kurt, you have a great rest of your day. Again, thank you so much for the interview, and I'm sure we'll be in touch very soon.
Great.
All right, thanks, Kurt. Have a good one.
Thanks.
Bye.
You too. Bye.
And that concludes another episode. I'm your host, Mark Sherlock, and always remember why you do what you do.